Hello, fellow Robo Capitalists. Hope you're well. I'm here with my good buddy Robert Barnes, who has been following the Trump assassination attempt very, very closely. And it's always great to get your insights, Robert. So thanks for coming on, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Glad to be here.
I'll just hand it to you. You can take the ball and run with it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the timing was interesting because I was also at the Republican National Convention this week.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people at that convention who I think would not have been there but for their belief that something was going to happen to Trump before he got there.
Huh.
That, Mitch McConnell and some other folks were there. I mean, Mike Pompeo, former head of the CIA, former State Department director, was telling delegates of Iowa, that were coming in to the event that he was going to be the vice presidential nominee. He was never on Trump's list, but he would have been on other people's list. I think the plan was to assassinate him right before the convention, blame it on Iran, use that as a rallying cry to go to war with Iran, and for the Republican Party to nominate Nikki Haley as president and Mike Pompeo as vice president. The two biggest sort of neocon deep state allies that were ever part of the Trump administration, in the name of defending the life and legacy of Trump, the nominating someone who is anti-Trump fundamentally, but would help promote the war. It would give Joe Biden an excuse for people to stop talking about how old he is and go. And I think they wanted to go to war with Iran. They thought Iran would step into Israel after October 7th. Iran didn't take the bait. And I think they needed something to accelerate that. They also know they're going to lose in Ukraine, so they need a new war to draw attention, and they need something to feed the military-industrial complex, all those weapons contracts and the like. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the timing was right before the convention. In addition, I think they had got word that Trump was not going to pick the vice president that they wanted him to pick, that the sort of deep state crowd wanted Trump to pick someone that would provide insurance for the deep state, that they could take Trump out at any time and know that the vice president was their ally. And that's who Tim Scott is. That's who Marco Rubio is. That's who Doug Burgum is. And Trump let them think that he might pick them, but it had been clear for about 3 weeks that J.D. Vance was in the lead. J.D. Vance is much more populist. He was anti the Ukraine war. He fought with the Marines in Iraq and felt he got lied to. I remember talking to him for about an hour and a half before he made the decision to come out against the Ukraine war back in March of 2022. And so I saw Karl Rove, whose hands were shaking with rage when he got the news that J.D. Vance was going to be the pick. So I think the goal on both sides of the deep state, the Republican and Democratic side, was to take Trump out before he could be officially the nominee, before J.D. Vance could be his official successor and vice presidential pick. And there's plenty of evidence that we have that either you have, one of the key things I always talk about in looking at whether something is a false flag. So like sometimes people misunderstand false flag to mean an event did not occur. A false flag is literally the old pirates would, post a false flag to be able to get real close to the ship they were going to raid, wait till they get right next to the ship, and then they bring up the old Jolly Roger. And it's surprise, surprise, we're not the British or the French or the Spanish or whoever you thought we were. So the culprit is not always correctly identified. And that doesn't always require that the culprit they blame not also be a culprit. It just means the narrative of the lone assassin, because America is unique in this respect. We're the only country that always seems to only have a lone assassin. Look at all the other people that get shot around the world, or as some attempted assassination. More often than not, there's some sort of conspiracy afoot, according to the official narrative. But the United States, it's always just some lone nut job that try to do something, so that they don't have to have meaningful complicity and culpability. But the way in which it happened, the evidence that's already developing, Chris Martinson's doing some great audio analysis work on this as we speak, strongly suggests that there were multiple shooters, that the key shots didn't come from the supposed assassin. At a minimum, you have massive security lapses. I always say that's a sign of a red flag of a staged event, a red flag of a false flag. is unusual and unexpected security lapses. That suggests somebody on the inside is making sure certain events can occur. But it looks to me that there were probably multiple shooters, and they thought, and in fact, the shots were excellent shots from a sniper's perspective. But Trump just happened to turn his head at exactly the right time. I mean, within a millisecond. If he turns his head in any other different direction, he's dead. And but when he stood up and said, "Fight, fight, fight," I think that was Trump's way of signaling to everybody he knew who and what was behind the assassination attempt. And since then, he's talking to Robert Kennedy about incorporating Kennedy's vaccine policy, and that gets conveniently leaked to the public. He's talking to Robert Kennedy about what happened and how Joe Biden had some unusual questions afterwards. Like, why did you turn your head, Don? Almost like someone complaining about why isn't he dead? He picks J.D. Vance. He accelerates his nomination to Monday afternoon rather than Thursday afternoon. So I think Trump, and I've talked to Don Jr. and some other people, I think they understand who it is that wants Trump out of the way. And I think their failure to get him is going to backfire on them in public policy in a whole bunch of ways. But I have zero doubts that it was at some level an inside job.
Okay, so man, that incredible. I had never heard these insights. I'd never heard you speak on it since Saturday. So, but I never thought of it that way, to be honest with you, Robert. But now that you're saying that, it's definitely, it's always a game of probabilities. But this is definitely something that you can't exclude. I mean, you've got to look at the possibilities here. Any logical person has to look at the possibilities, especially after you look at the immense failure and the incompetence. I remember just on Sunday, I was listening to Brett's podcast, Brett Weinstein, and he was talking about Hanlon's razor and that it's never attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance or incompetence or stupidity. And he said, this is so egregious as far as their competence or incompetence. He said, basically his message was, I don't even know if you can. You might not even be able to. And the first thing that came to my mind as an example, it would be like Michael Jordan missing 10 layups in a row. Can you if he misses 2 layups in a row, then fine. You can just blame that on temporary incompetence, if you want to call it that. And then he's going to go on and score 40 points. But if Michael Jordan in his prime heyday misses 10 layups in a row, you can't attribute that to incompetence. Now, all of a sudden, you've got to step back and ask, is he trying to throw the game? And I think that's part of what you're saying. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And because they had to have an extraordinary sequence of events occur for incompetence to be the explanation. And for example, Trump has a usual Secret Service team. Many members of that usual Secret Service team were given that day off.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, I'm not.
Wow.
The second part is the local region had some high quality Secret Service agents they could sub in, but they were reassigned to Jill Biden, who decided to have a fundraiser the same day in the same region that Trump was having his event and his rally. You have the third aspect is that they had actually staked out that precise location. They knew that location was even an amateur could get off a high quality shot from that location. There had been snipers from the Secret Service on top of that particular roof. And then they ended up, for reasons they're yet to explain, decided not to secure the roof.
Said because the roof was too steep. Robert, yes. You didn't hear her say that? It's too steep of a roof. We don't want to. It's too dangerous. Come on.
Exactly. Well, precise. It's when you're getting implausible explanations like that.
Yeah.
That it's like all the implausibilities keep adding up. Implausible that this happened to be the time that they laid somebody off, or didn't have somebody's part of the team. didn't happen to be the time where Joe Biden had an event that distracted a bunch of Secret Service agents and took them off the duty call as well. Happened to be the time when they decide not to secure a building that's uniquely high risk, when they were actually on top of the building staging what that would look like the day before, and then coming up with the excuse of the sloped roof that everybody knows is not plausible, because
when they had their sniper on, the counter sniper was on a sloped roof.
Exactly. The White House has sloped roofs. I mean, and they're there every day. So and then you step in further, and it's now come out that they identified the person they're claiming is the sniper 3 hours before that he was on, because he's walking around with a rangefinder. Right. I mean, this was not some genius assassin. This is a guy walking around. I wonder if this shot from here would work. I wonder if a shot from here would work. Almost, by the way, like the profile of a patsy. Right. In other words, he was so over the top in everybody seeing what he was doing. So much so that randos were screaming, "This guy's on the roof with a gun," minutes before he even fired a shot.
Yeah. That they got video of him crawling across the darn roof.
Exactly. They got video of him right outside the building acting weird. They got with the rangefinder. So we know that he was on Secret Service's radar screen. He's acting so over the top in being a parent. And supposedly was playing a game that's about, can Secret Service adequately protect the president? And the president's a Trump president. And he made comments on those games days before the event about how he was going to really win the game in a surprising way. So he's behaving like someone who's almost meant to be a patsy, more so than an actual guy. In fact, the actual assassin, he had tried to join. You got a 20-year-old kid with no professional experience who tried to join his low-level high school shooting team and failed because he literally couldn't hit the right side of a barn. And he's the one who is supposedly snuck past Secret Service, snuck by the local police, snuck past everybody observing, and got off 5 or 6 shots right on the president.
In the primo location, too.
Completely. Just 100 yards or so away. Then you have, so we know that he was on everybody's attention now, and they did nothing about it. That they also, inside that building, there were Secret Service agents.
Right.
It's one of why weren't they doing anything when they were notified? Because we now know that local police notified them 10 minutes before, saying there's a guy with a gun on the roof, They all got that notice. Nobody's doing anything. And here it's like, it's one thing to say, well, maybe they were worried about pulling the trigger because maybe there was some other explanation. I don't buy that. If you know Secret Service protocol, it's not likely. But the thing they can't explain is, why was Trump sent up on the stage after they were alerted there's a man with a gun on the roof 100 yards away?
Why didn't they take him down immediately?
Correct. Well, I mean, they even set him up after they got that notice. They get the notice and like, hey, Don, time to go up on stage. So the probability of incompetence as the most likely explanation, just when you go through step by step, diminishes at each step. And then we have now Chris Martinson's doing the sound alert, and what people at the scene said. They said they heard shots from multiple locations. Now, sometimes that can be tricky because you get echoes and all the rest. But Chris Martinson has been breaking, and some other sound experts have been breaking down the sound. And they're saying there's multiple shooters. There's at least 2, maybe 3. There might have been one on the water tower, and there might have been someone in that building that the reason why they weren't taking out the supposed assassin, is someone might have been shooting from that building. So it would have been difficult to know what was going on. And in terms of how many shots and who was shooting from it. You've got, as Trump said last night, he said there were bullets still blazing everywhere, going over people. That's more like 8, 12 shots than just the 2 or 3. That guy should have had the time to get off at all under their own timeline. And so you look at also, then they look at the trajectory of the shots.
Okay, so this is exactly what I was going to touch on. Is that a real photo? And for the people that might not have seen it, it's the one where you see the bullet like past Trump, and you can see kind of like the stream that through the air, through the bullet piercing the air, like almost like a jet. And if that was real, couldn't an expert analyze the angle of that stream that was created by the trajectory of the bullet to determine if that was coming at a level or an angle that was level to Trump or a level that was elevated?
And initial people looking at it without getting in that, they don't yet have the full expert analysis, was that trajectory couldn't have come from that roof.
Yeah, it looked flat.
Yes, exactly.
Based on the photo I saw.
That's correct. Now, that itself isn't interesting. So why did CNN, of all rallies, when they've been skipping Trump rallies routinely, why were they covering it live? And why did that reporter, the photographer, my understanding is that photo was taken by a New York Times photographer who had his camera speed at like 800, whatever it was, which is very rare and very unusual. He, by the way, apparently is the same photographer who captured the person whispering into George W. Bush's ear about the towers being attacked on 9/11. So this guy has a magical way of showing up in interesting times. And there's people that are curious whether somebody was tipped off that something big might happen today. You should be here, without necessarily tipping everything off. So, and that you could see how the deep state would want Trump killed in a public way, because the message was, don't ever mess with us. If you do stuff, if you decide to challenge us at any level, we'll not only bankrupt you and indict you, we'll flat out murder you. I mean, that's what they did to President John Kennedy, Robert Francis Kennedy Sr., Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. All of those assassinations had at some level government complicity and conspiracy. The only question, or to me, and that's lasting in the debate, is what's the scale and scope of it. I think the same is true of what happened to Trump, and I think Trump knows it, by the way. And I think that's why you've seen a different tone from him of late. Like last night, his speech, kind of thankful to be alive. But I think the other aspect is you're going to see him be much more aggressive at dealing with some of these things than he would have otherwise been. I think that reach out to Robert Kennedy was supposed to signal that. The inclusion of J.D. Vance as VP was intended to signal that, and that he knows the deep state tried and the deep state missed. And that in ways that it's almost like the bankruptcy cases, the cases trying to make him bankrupt, the cases trying to put him in prison, didn't really shake him up very much, because he thought, these are crap political cases, they'll get overturned at some higher level. But the attempt to assassinate him did wake him up. And he saw it in live time. He's like, we need to do some radical change in America. And that now he's much more committed to it than he otherwise would have been, because he understands what they tried to do and how they just literally came within a quarter inch of getting their desired result.
Not even. Can you explain the patsy role a little bit better, and not just based on what happened Saturday night, but what has happened throughout history of American presidents being assassinated? And then, because that's going to be the pushback, Robert, it's going to be, well, if this was the deep state trying to do this, why on earth would they get some kid that can't hit the broadside of a barn, that's 20 years old, that that had an inadequate weapon? I don't know that's the case, but I've heard some people say that. Why wouldn't they have a guy there that can really get the job done? And then, by the way, what do you think the motivation would be for the kid?
Yeah,
he knows he's done. Like, what's in it for him?
So there's already inconsistent stories about the kid. We'll start with sort of the profile of a patsy, and that I always say every great crime needs a great patsy, particularly a political crime. You need a convenient narrative script designed. You need somebody that the event can be blamed on, that won't implicate powerful actors, institutional actors, governmental actors, and and preferably they die so they can never talk. Lee Harvey Oswald famously shot before he could ever meaningfully talk. The Vegas shooter, we will never know whether it was even him, because he got shot before he could ever talk. And you have many, and in America, there's been this profile pattern of trying to blame a single crazy assassin for an event, or in some cases maybe 2 or 3, but it's always some couple of crazy people are involved. Whether it's Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Saran, he's a crazy guy. Went and somehow snuck into his security and shot and killed him. They usually have mental illness issues of some sort.
Legitimate.
Legitimate mental health issues.
Okay.
And there's already information. This kid's parents apparently were both mental health counselors, which is a little weird to begin with. You've got all the Manchurian Candidate. People can go back and watch them, either the Manchurian Candidate films, the Parallax View, which Warren Beatty starred in, which hinted at this kind of thing in the early 60s to early 70s, because people were wondering, how does some crazy guy keep getting in and assassinating prominent critics of the military-industrial complex? It seems, why don't the crazy people ever kill the military-industrial complex? Right? Why is it none of those? Why is it none of those guys? Well, why is it the Federal Reserve? Nobody's ever thought to try to assassinate anyone in the Federal Reserve. It's just the critics of the Federal Reserve. Well, I'm sure that's a coincidence. But they need somebody who's a little bit crazy, who's a loner, doesn't have a lot of friends, doesn't have a lot of family, doesn't have a lot of people that are going to be able to competently counter the narrative and say, hold on a second, this doesn't make any sense. And so that he fits that pattern. But he's often, you're right, these guys are rarely people you would trust to pull something like this off. And I was intrigued by Trump talking last night, saying that when he was on the ground, there were still bullets coming. So what it means is somebody who was very, very good kept shooting. But for the miraculous actions of Trump, he would be dead. And that would suggest that did not come from that kid. But the kid fits his social media was non-existent, which is very rare.
That's another thing that I just wrote down. They can't find anything on him. Like anything? Right. Like really? You can't find his cell phone record that would indicate that he maybe texted one of his buddies about this? I mean, every single time that you get some crazy gun person, they have a manifesto, they have all this stuff. I mean, again, if he's not leaving any trail, what the hell is his motivation? Because to me, that he knows he's going to die. So that would be the only motivation, was just to make yourself look like a hero. You're a nobody, but this is how you can be a somebody.
Exactly. And that's usually the profile of your mass school shooters and the like.
Right.
And now take a guess what they are going to blame on him in a certain way. Like if you're the deep state, what's sort of an enemy, institutional enemy, if you will. Guess what accounts?
Gun control or something?
Crypto. That he has crypto accounts. That so that somehow crypto is part of the reason for the assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Is this the narrative that's coming out? I haven't heard of this.
Yes, that the only thing they've found so far, they couldn't get through his secure communications on his phone, couldn't get even into aspects of his phone or anything.
But even that, how can you not? Are you kidding me? How can the Secret Service, the CIA, the NSA, I don't know who the hell's in charge of that, but how can you not? And again, the kid's 20 years old. It's not like he's Jason Bourne, for heaven's sakes. How do you not get into his phone?
Exactly. And the kid has such little footprint, but according to the new report, he had 3 secured crypto accounts that around the world. And so, I mean, the goal is this is what happens when people use crypto. They become assassins. The 1 minute Bitcoin, the next minute they want to kill the president. It's that kind of logic. I figured they would try to demonize crypto somehow. And maybe that was supposed to be the link to Iran somehow, that this guy was paid by Iran. And then he did it, but he did it through crypto, because we all know crypto is only for criminals, because good, honest people use only central banks and their money and their banking institutions to secure their assets, because that's a great way to secure your money. And so that's apparently the next step in the narrative. And then the CIA, of course, leaked over the weekend that Iran had been making personal threats and plans to assassinate.
Can you expand on that? Because I heard that, but I haven't had the time to research it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's frankly completely incredulous. There's lots of reasons to criticize the government of Iran. I'm not a big fan. Iran used to be a very free society before the Ayatollah took over, but Iran is not known for this. Iran is not known for assassinations of people around the world. That's not what they do. Is they support co-religionists who have a similar political viewpoint, and they often, you could call them terrorism in this case, in the case of Hamas, the case of Hezbollah, the case of ISIS, the case of some others. But even though in ISIS's case they were on the opposite side, so it always depended on the circumstances. But the idea that they would be obsessed with assassinating Donald Trump is kind of ridiculous. But what the CIA said, this was the story they leaked this weekend, that they had plausible evidence that there was a high risk to President Trump because the Iranian government had decided to assassinate him in response to him killing General Soleimani, and that they were wanting to do it in a high-profile public way. So they had that script ready to issue. And my guess was that they were going to let a little drama play out. But a couple of days after what they thought would be a successful assassination, probably the Monday or the Tuesday of this week, when the Republican delegates would be in mourning, but the meeting to decide who's going to be on the ticket, they would have put out, incredible evidence of the Iranian connection, likely using crypto to fund his crypto accounts. And my guess is this kid didn't even have these accounts. That these were dummy accounts set up by others somehow in his name. And because that's, nobody loves crypto actually more than the CIA, but they just don't want the commoners using it.
How do they usually get the patsy to go through with it?
That's always interesting. So like in Saran's case, so Robert Kennedy Jr. has come out. I also think it's not a coincidence that conversation leaked. I think Trump wanted that conversation leaked. And it's not a coincidence he talked to him right after the attempted assassination. Because Trump's sitting there talking to Robert Kennedy saying, man, Joe Biden calls and he's asking me why I turned my head. And it's not a coincidence he's talking to Robert Kennedy Jr., the man who's been going around the country saying the CIA and the deep state assassinated both his father and his uncle, President John Kennedy and would-be President Robert Francis Kennedy. So the way in which they had kind of laid this out, they had pre-scripted the narrative to fit into this. And how you get the patsy. So Robert Kennedy Jr. has talked about Saran and how he's concluded that Saran was a patsy that night and was not the person who shot his father. In fact, it was a security guard who infiltrated the security unit, who came up right behind Robert Kennedy, and with the distraction of Saran kind of shooting up in the air, came in and shot him right in the back of the head. And that's what the forensic pathologist ultimately had concluded at the time before they rushed him out. So a patsy is very much, they've been obsessed with it since the 1940s. And it started with derivatives of what the Germans and the Japanese were experimenting with. They wanted to see, could we just experiment on humans to have complete control over them? And there was an aspect of that was propagandistic in nature, but the other aspect was literal medical experimentation on them. And they usually pick populations that are vulnerable or susceptible. So like in America, a lot of the eugenics, as you've talked about, that whole world population control people, who do they pick on? They pick on foster kids. They pick on Native Americans. They pick on poorer populations. They pick on the politically unprotected. And so you find somebody that's personally vulnerable. And this was part of the MK Ultra project. This was part of all of it was how could we get people to do whatever we wanted? It was also part of the Perfect Soldier project. Their idea was how could we really tune up a soldier to be an ideal soldier and not question orders, not have much of a conscience, to be able to survive in extraordinary circumstances. And it's all different methods of mental manipulation, usually using some pharmacological agent. But the profile...
drug.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And always fit the profile they're looking for is exactly like this kid. A loner with actual mental health issues, who wants to be important, who has delusions of grandeur of a certain kind, who feels rejected by society and life, and the right sort of mentor comes in, helps him, guides him, directs him, but usually leaves very little fingerprints.
And that's why they can't get the cell phone, because they don't want that information leaked.
Exactly. So everything's falling into line. Like I always tell people, if you want to understand what's happening in any case, criminal or otherwise, don't just look at what is there. Look at what should be there that's not there. And already there's a lot of things that should be there that are not there.
Right. You know, I hate to make light of it, but as you're explaining that, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Zoolander. Remember the
It
first
is.
Zoolander movie where they brainwashed him to kill the Malaysian president or whatever? I mean, again, I hate to make light of it, but that's like the exact process you're describing.
And I think part of what we're seeing is what we've seen with the Western military industrial complex now for about half a century, which is they're also dangerously incompetent. Their moral compass has long been broken. But the reason why they can't pull it off the way they could pull it off in the 60s is because they don't have the same capabilities anymore. Right. I mean, it went into Afghanistan and failed, Iraq and failed, Libya and failed, Syria and failed. Tried to take out Putin every way to Sunday for the last 20 years, failed. Going to Ukraine, failed. So try to take out Trump with impeachments, with indictments, with civil suits, with bankruptcy, with smear campaigns, fail. And we have people, it's what happens when you combine corrupt deep state with DEI. You get Zoolander versions of DEI, of deep state.
That's funny. So the DEI is not only negatively impacting the Secret Service, but it's impacting the whole deep state, and they don't even realize they're shooting themselves in the foot. No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to go over quickly, get your insights. Do you think what you're saying, your theory, has something to do with the fact that they didn't immediately cover Trump? Because that was one thing that I was like, look, the guy's just been shot. He's on the ground. He gets up and you let him like put his head up above everyone else and do this. And I mean, I'm not a Secret Service person, but just using good old fashioned common sense, I would assume that they wouldn't allow his head to be exposed for 1 second. And why wouldn't they have some sort of, not just human shield, but if you're going to put a 5-foot gal right in front of Trump, how tall is Trump? Like 6'4", 6'3"?
He carries himself like 6'4", but I think he's at least 6'2".
6'2" or so. So you got some 5-foot gal there that's trying to, but they're like, I noticed some, not all, I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but some of the secret security people weren't like this on Trump. They're kind of like this, like ducking down, like, just trying to give the shooters, an additional opportunity, which I don't know. Do you think there's something to that, or just, again, incompetence?
Well, the reason why I would say incompetence is a less likely explanation is because it is core priority number one is you don't let even Trump get up on the stage until you get the all clear.
Right.
And not only did they not get the all clear, they got the opposite of the all clear. Before Trump even walked onto the stage, a local police had signaled all the Secret Service, man with gun on roof, because the guy had pointed the gun at him. And he was like, whoa, and stuck his head down. And so they should have never let him get on the stage, number one. Number two, at a minimum, should have rushed up onto the stage as they should have done that if somehow there was some delay for some reason in the communication relay. But as soon as they got it, the third thing is, if you've ever seen Obama speak, they use that protective glass all the way around so that so the sniper can't get through. The sniper would have to literally be on top of the person, couldn't just be at a high trajectory. They didn't have that, and they haven't had that in many cases for Trump. Fourth, Trump's own Secret Service team had for months been requesting enhancement of the Secret Service team to have more protection, and Biden had refused it, just like he had refused to give Robert Kennedy Jr. any Secret Service protection. And he only did it after the embarrassment of what happened here. So that's Biden's sort of wink, wink, nod, nod. Somebody please do what you got to do. Because Biden thinks like a street level criminal. I always describe Biden as he's LBJ, but retarded. So if you combine the two, you can get a predictive analysis of how he'll behave. He behaves like a street level thug criminal, like a little, like a captain, rather than the head of the mob.
That might explain why the Secret Service looked like they got caught so far off guard. Like that was my first impression. Like the gal can't even get the thing in the holster, and they're like, they're just scrambling around like this isn't their profession. Like they're somehow amateurs, and they just, they didn't know what to do, and they're, what. And maybe the explanation, I'm not saying that it is, but maybe the explanation is because they didn't think he'd miss.
That's exactly right.
They were expecting him to go down and not have to jump to his protection.
Precisely. And then they're trying to figure out, how do I get out of the way so he gets hit without looking like I'm getting out of the way so he gets hit?
Yeah.
I mean,
and to the viewer, that looks like them just being completely caught off guard.
Exactly. And then even if incompetence is the explanation, the question becomes, why did they put an incompetent person in that position?
Yeah, right.
Like, that's why I tell people, even if you think the individual officer is just being incompetent, that means that they knew that person was incompetent, and someone who put them there in that position wanted an incompetent person defending President Trump's life. And either way, it's a conspiracy to kill the president.
Yeah, that's why I don't buy the whole, well, the Secret Service delegated this to the local police, and they were supposed to watch the building, and they kind of dropped the ball. And, for all you conspiracy theorists out there, this was just a simple lack of communication. I don't buy that for 1 second. And the reason I don't is it takes me back to one of the businesses I ran, Robert, where we had to deal with hotels all the time, which were notoriously incompetent. So what you do is you have backup procedures. You have redundancies in place that assume they are going to drop the ball. And if they don't drop the ball, well, that's just gravy. That makes your life a little bit easier. But you've got all these plan B, plan C put into place. So if they do, then your mission is not impacted. So if I was doing that for my business, I can't even imagine that the Secret Service isn't doing that if they were truly trying to protect the person that they're trying to protect.
Exactly. And when you add to it that I don't think it's a coincidence they tried this in Pennsylvania. My experience in Pennsylvania is that we have some of the most corrupt political officials in the country. I got like a half dozen cases just here.
That's where your Amish buddy is, right?
Yeah, that's where Amos Miller's case is. Yeah. That's where a bunch of other Amish people are being targeted, people who even work with the Amish, people who aren't, people challenging smart meters, people challenging, I'm here in Pennsylvania as we speak, because yesterday I was defending a person who they're trying to lock up because she tape recorded her own court proceeding. And she documented by doing so that the court reporter and the corporate law firm were colluding to falsify and fabricate a court record, a court transcript. And that's why she recorded in the first place. And yet they're trying to put her in jail. She's on house arrest as we speak.
Wow.
And so that there's such institution. I represent two other people who were illegally imprisoned by a judge who doesn't even have criminal authority, who is part of the court that governs the whole state called the Commonwealth Court. And even when called on it, he didn't correct it and left them illegally imprisoned for the better part of a month. So I think that where they went a little wrong was not. So I think they thought they had corrupt state actors. To give an example, the talk was that if Biden stepped down, Kamala Harris would be the nominee. And guess who she was looking at picking for her vice president? Governor Shapiro of the state of Pennsylvania. So you have I think they thought they had allies at the top, highest ranking state law enforcement officials, Attorney General's office, and the governor's office that would cover them, provide protection for them. The only thing that probably went a little AWOL for them is you got some local cops who are there. And Butler County is not a democratically controlled county. And those cops came out and they've already said two things. One, they said that was all Secret Service area protection. We were told that was not for our protection. That was theirs. And even despite that, when we saw somebody, we actually reported it to Secret Service immediately. And they just didn't take corrective action. They said, and then secondly, one of the officers came out and said there was definitely more than one shooter. And that's somebody who would know professionally when there's more than one shooter.
Right.
Rando in the audience. He said, given what was happening, there was at least two shooters out there. and because apparently several of them almost got severely injured, and so they're like, whatever the official explanation is, ain't working. So I think even that part of the plan didn't fully go to plan, but it's not a coincidence they chose the state of Pennsylvania.
So let's look forward into the future. Two questions here. What do you think the odds are that Trump wins? I personally think it's as close to 100% as you can get. Who do you think he's going to be running against? And then if you're the deep state, what do you do from here?
I mean, the deep state's plan Bs have not been very good of late. So you can tell that, I mean, I don't think they had a plan B for Trump living. They just, when does that happen? And so it'd be like if John F. Kennedy went and tried to get his, tie his shoe when all the shooters started shooting. How would history have been different? It might have been very, very different. And I think
they might have had a better plan back then because they didn't have all the DEI hires, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's the problem. You got to have the quotas. So I think plan B right now is to try to force Biden out, and thinking that if they could, if the deep state is smart, if we were writing this like a movie script, I would pick a Democratic candidate that nobody's talking about. I would probably pick someone like The Rock. The Rock is Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Wow. Okay. I haven't heard that one before.
He's told everybody in Hollywood for 10 years he wants to be president. So he's very politically ambitious. He can match the machismo of Trump.
Yeah.
He has independent celebrity, and he's probably very, very controllable. And so your next goal is you got to get Uncle Joe to step down. And Uncle Joe doesn't want to retire as captain. He's not interested in stepping down. So that's the first hurdle. And what they keep doing is they spread a story. Biden about to step down. We've heard the inside information. Biden's about, because they're trying to force it to become a reality. When Biden's like, hold on a second, these people, I'm not stepping down. What are you talking about? So all of that is going on. There's people who want him to step down, like Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Hillary Clinton, Gavin Newsom, Governor Whitmer, and Governor Shapiro, because all of them think either they'll be the presidential nominee. And this will be for those folks that didn't live through it. It's 1968 Chicago all over again. It's fascinating to me. They're choosing to possibly have a contested convention with a bunch of crazy protesters for the first time since 1968. And they decided to make
that, Robert. I just talked to Brent Johnson in the earlier live stream, and he mentioned this, but he didn't. He said he just needed to research it further, but it sounds like you've got the details. What happened there, and then what can we learn about what might happen with the DNC thing here moving forward?
So what happened is the delegates who went to the convention in Chicago in 1968, many of them were delegates in favor of Robert Francis Kennedy, who had just won the California primary a few weeks before. And he'd also won Indiana, he'd won South Dakota, he'd won a bunch of places. Then he gets assassinated the night of his victory in California. So now when they're going into the convention, there's no nominee because their chosen candidate is dead. Okay. And so the whole Democratic Party apparatus was fighting like mad. This was also peak Vietnam War protest era. So the Hunter Thompson was there in Chicago that night. Norman Mailer and Pat Buchanan were hanging out in the same hotel room watching the riots take place in Grant Park, where the Chicago police just go crazy and start beating the heck out of all the hippies. And so you got the hippie movement there. You got this leads to the Chicago 7 trial with judicial corruption. They try to lock up lawyers. But a lot of the sort of upper middle class watching it live on TV were watching cops just pound on these protesters. And so it shocked everybody. Inside the convention hall, good old Mayor Daley was using some politically incorrect terms for Jewish people to refer to various senators and congressmen he didn't like. That was caught live on TV. You got just disaster happening inside in convention hall. And LBJ, who Joe Biden is the most similar to, decides to force through Hubert Humphrey as the nominee. And then you had George Wallace running as an independent in response to all of this. But Chicago 68 is the most famous convention scene in the history of political conventions, but it might not top Chicago 24. If you're the deep state, you can't afford. The biggest problem they've had is Kamala Harris is more unpopular than Joe Biden. Hillary Clinton is more unpopular than Joe Biden. Gavin Newsom, more unpopular than Joe Biden.
Oh, see, I always go to Gavin Newsom or like Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama literally hates people. So she's told people there's no way she will ever run for office. She doesn't want to kiss babies. She wants to slap them. And not only that, she has been waiting to grift and make a bunch of money for forever. And so she told Barack, no more politics after we're out of here because we're going to cash in. And they did. I mean, they're worth over $100 million now. They got homes everywhere. Yeah. They got homes in all the places climate change tells you not to have a home. That tells you what they do by climate change.
Okay, so you think the probability of her even wanting that, let alone being a candidate, is extremely low? Extremely low.
And she, too, does worse in the Midwest than Biden, because there's these older blue-collar voters up here that recognize the local corrupt political captain who just happens to be the president. And they're like, yeah, he's okay. He'll help get this fixed. He'll take care of something for Joey. And yeah, maybe he's a little perv, but that's okay. He's just good old Uncle Joe. Those people don't connect to Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama. And that was always Biden's ace in the hole. The problem is it looks like the deep state has decided that nobody normal can beat Trump now. So if they end up with somebody normal, you're absolutely right. Trump is going to win in a walk and in a landslide. The deep state's only hope is to go pick a complete surprise, like someone like
Hail Mary.
Yeah, exactly. Go Hail Mary. Go somebody that nobody was thinking about that can, like the big swing voter group here in America this election cycle are young working class voters, minority millennials and Zoomers, and white working class voters, but they're the younger voters. They're voters whose lives suck. I mean, they're living at home. They can't afford rent. They can't afford to buy a home. Can't afford to buy a car in some cases. Their wages have not anywhere near kept up with the cost of living. They thought life was going to be great when they got the stimmy checks and they were in Robinhood and GameStop stock was going up and everything was going to be grand. And now all of a sudden it's all turned the other way. There's a war overseas that maybe they could get dragged into or drafted into by some manner of means. So they're like anybody but Biden. And they go back and forth between Trump or Kennedy in terms of, or whether they're even going to vote. But that's where, if you're the deep state, you need someone who could appeal to those. It'd be some out of the blue celebrity and be someone like The Rock. The question is whether they can convince him to run. He would hate it if he ran and lost. I think that would have been an easier thing to do if they had succeeded in assassinating Trump. Then they could have, they would have been protected both sides because they would have had Nikki Haley as a Republican nominee, but they probably go and get The Rock as the Democratic nominee, and then he could absorb a lot of the Trump vote. They're also obsessed with making sure Kennedy's vote total stays low because they hate Kennedy even more than Trump. So, I think, but getting Biden out of there is not going to be easy. That's going to be the hard trick for him.
Why is that, Robert? Because it seems to me like the narrative is really shifting, and that's inevitable.
That's what they're trying to create. By shaping the narrative that it's inevitable, they're hoping that Biden goes along. The thing is, Biden has always seen the elites, even though he's done their dirty business forever, he thinks that they look down on him. He's like LBJ in this respect. I mean, he's talked about this. He would come home and he'd been picked on at school, and his mom would say, "No, you're smart, Joe." His mom was just being nice to him. Joe's dumb. But but he looks at all these people, think they're better than me. They think they're more important than me. I'm going to show them. And he's incredibly stubborn. He will not go out in a way that makes him look like an idiot and a dementia candidate who couldn't even fight. That's why Trump, by the way, is provoking him by saying, he looks so weak. He's so weak. He knows that will motivate Biden to stay in because he feels good about defeating Biden. Feels good about beating.
So
he feels good about beating any of the known alternatives. He just doesn't want an unknown curveball alternative as the Democratic nominee. So Biden is really stubborn. His key people around him are only loyal to him, not the party. It shows how much a lot of people thought that Obama was running things. He's not. Biden's own people have been there forever. He's connected to the old corrupt wing of the Democratic Party. Obama's, big tech, Wall Street, Hollywood. That's who Obama is, sort of the new Democratic Party. By contrast, Biden is the old Democratic Party, local labor bosses, local political machines, local precincts, the people that are used to doing business the old transactional way. And I mean, to give an idea of the Biden family, if you do any work for the Biden family, they often just stiff you and refuse to pay you because it's like, well, it's a privilege that you got to work for us, even if you're the florist or the gardener or the plumber. I mean, that's their mindset. So they're an entitlement mindset and a resentment mindset. And that's not a mindset that leads to going out easily.
So if you're the deep, I'm sure you've used some game theory here. If you're the deep state, how do you structure a scenario that allows Biden to step out and maintain dignity and go out like the hero?
Exactly. That's the script that has to be narrated. And I think that
Unless you assassinate him.
Exactly.
I mean, I hate to even
say that. The thing was, I thought they would need to take him and Kamala out at the same time, because then you're stuck with Kamala as president. That's a disaster. And you're stuck with she can't pick a VP without it being approved by the House, which is controlled by Republicans. And if you take both of them out, then you're stuck with the deep state would be fine. Mike Johnson would be president. But that isn't an easy script or solution with Trump coming in. So I think they have a problem. And I think right now the plan is just put enough pressure on Biden that he goes away. The problem is they don't know what his triggers are. They still don't understand him after all these years. And I think that it's not they need to do a backdoor deal of some sort. I mean, I've always thought them dropping little things about Hunter in different ways was meant to pressure Biden because they could extend that to other members of his family.
Maybe they've got some dirt on him.
Oh, they got tons of it. But how do they play that? They really need that to be a state prosecution, not a federal prosecution, because Joe can just pardon everybody. So that's their problem there. That's another reason why he doesn't want to go anywhere. He's planning on pardoning his whole family so that nobody can come after them down the road. I mean, his brother and his sister were part of the whole Biden crime family that was run and organized by Biden, selling access for the last 50 years. I mean, as a lawyer, I had clients of mine who were approached by people part of the Biden political machine when he was vice president, make a certain, bring some cash, and Joe will make sure your criminal case goes away. And this was overt, out in the open. I mean, that's how brazen old Uncle Joe has been. So he's not eager to go gently into that good night at all. I don't know if he's fighting against the dying of the light in the process, but he definitely is someone they're going to have a hard time pulling out. I thought maybe they would whack him with COVID, but then I'm sure Pfizer's arguing in the script, please no, he's been boosted 6 times and has like 8 vaccines. Please don't let COVID be the one that takes him out.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. If anyone is listening to what you're saying about the Bidens, paying people off or just taking bribes and whatnot, you got to open up your eyes. I remember a very good friend of mine, a guy that I knew, a very successful entrepreneur, Harry Reid, did the exact same thing to him in Las Vegas this would have been back in probably 2005 or 2000. I forgot when it was, but basically, yeah, they accused him of something that he didn't do. And they said, hey, to make this go away, you can pay Harry, I forgot what it was, like $1 million or something like that. And he went ahead and did it. And then they prosecuted him anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's their favorite thing to do. Biden loved to do it. 9 times out of 10, he wouldn't lift a finger for anybody. It was all a scam to hose him down and get the money.
Yeah.
It was just the nature of the animal. But that makes him a tough guy to pull out. So, if you think of it like a mob crime family, there's only one exit typically. The problem with that exit is they're stuck with Kamala Harris. They're stuck with a vice presidential problem. So there is no easy solutions at this point for the deep state, given the circumstances.
It's a crazy world we live in, Robert, isn't it?
No doubt. I mean, but to me, it was a great week because Trump surviving means we may get the most reformist presidency in the modern history of the country that can take apart these corrupt institutions that are destroying freedom and liberty in this country. And thank God he just wanted to look at that beautiful, pretty chart, as he calls it, and turned his head at just the right time. And it's like I've told people, it's like you don't have to be spiritual to say that looks like divine intervention.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Some level it was, but hopefully will result in some real liberty-oriented reforms coming down the pipeline if we can survive the next 4 months.
Yeah, speaking of liberty, you're on the forefront there, my good friend. It's always appreciated what you do. And you've got a website that we were talking about prior to going live where you're planning on taking and including a summary of your experience with our whole FOIA request with the Federal Reserve. And, you know, this goes back to our dinner that we had in Las Vegas at the Palazzo there at Cut a few years back. And, you know, one of our main goals of this FOIA request was to give other people the tools they need so that they could streamline the process to hold these, to keep these people honest. You know, whether it's the Federal Reserve Act and the Fed or politicians or whatever it is. I mean, the way we're going to win this is by people coming together, the average Joe and Jane. And this is going to be won, I think, by a bottoms-up approach. I don't think, I hope it is won by electing the right guy, but I think the probability of that is extremely low. It's got to come from the people. And the good news is there's a hell of a lot more of us than there is of them. That's for sure. But they have to have the tools. And this is one of our main goals of that FOIA request. So you're posting, or you're going to be posting some of your findings on what was the website, the URL, Robert?
1776lawcenter.com. 1776lawcenter.com. And what you'll find when you get there is there's a financial freedom, political freedom, medical freedom, and food freedom sections. So on those sections, we upload case updates, news updates, links to other stories about these cases and issues, model legislation for congressmen or state representatives to pass, because I've had that request from multiple people. And in the financial freedom section, there's two subcomponents. One is covering issues related to crypto, and the other is covering issues related to the Fed. And this will include all of our legal actions against the Federal Reserve with George, which will include how we went about getting it. It will include the actual documents we got from the Fed, so you can look at it yourself.
Yeah.
Those ones we got so far. There's still more we're seeking. And we're going to be putting in there how you can draft your own FOIA request to all the different Fed branches and what language and terms to use. Plus, because they had to give us their internal map, if you will, of how they locate files, their version of a Dewey system, that will show you using that how you can request that information directly yourself to do it. And we'll also, in the political freedom sections, we're going to have a bunch of stuff about FOIA and Open Records Acts by state, so that people can just cut and paste. If they want to find out what the police know in certain respects as to the Trump assassination attempt, there'll be how you can do an Open Records Act request from, say, the Butler County or the State Police Center. So we're going to have that as well. But just in the Fed section will be everything we've got so far, how you can use that to do your own FOIA, and as well as news links and other information too.
That's fantastic, buddy. Josh, do me a favor. Robert, what was the URL again? Josh, let's put this in the description in the pinned comment.
1776lawcenter.com.
And that's the number 1776.
Yes, the number.
All right, buddy. As always, just a mind-blowing conversation. I sure appreciate you coming on and sharing all your insights.
We do indeed live in interesting times.
All right. Have a good one.
Have a good time.